When it comes to manipulation, the first thing you need to understand is this: it doesn't happen in the open. He doesn't look like someone twisting your arm or forcing you to do something against your will. It's subtle, it's silent, and most of the time, you won't even realize it's happening until you're already tangled in it. A manipulative woman doesn't come to you waving a red flag. She comes as someone who seems to care, someone who understands you, someone who connects with your emotions in a way that feels comforting. And that's exactly why so many men fall into the trap, because it feels good at first, it feels natural. But beneath the surface, there's always a strategy. Manipulation works because it targets your emotions, not your logic. Think about it. If someone tried to control you through reason, you'd resist it instantly. But when they go after your feelings, when they make you feel guilty, when they make you doubt yourself, when they make you believe that your worth is tied to their approval, you become easier to influence without even realizing it. It's like psychological camouflage. She doesn't have to force you. She just has to guide you toward making the choices that benefit her while making you believe they're yours. The most common tools used in manipulation are incredibly subtle. Guilt is a big one. She'll make you feel like you're not doing enough, not giving enough, not caring enough, even when you're already doing more than you should. And the moment you start overcompensating just to or make things right, you've handed her control. Then there's the victim card, another powerful tactic. A manipulative woman knows that if she positions herself as the one being hurt, you'll automatically step in to fix things. Even when you've done nothing wrong, it's emotional chess. Unless you understand the moves, you'll always be playing defense without realizing why you're losing. Another thing you need to understand is that manipulation thrives on dependency. If she can make you dependent on her affection, her approval, or even a validation, she's already in control. She'll create situations where you feel like her. Maybe she does small things for you, gives you attention, builds you up just enough to keep you hooked, and then slowly starts withdrawing it when she wants you to bend. You'll find yourself working harder and harder to earn back what she once gave you freely, and that's when you know the game has started. But here's the truth: the problem isn't her. It's your lack of awareness. Manipulation can only work if you don't see it. The moment you understand the psychology behind it, the emotional triggers, the patterns, the tactics, it starts losing its power. You begin to notice the inconsistencies, the calculated timing, the way certain words are designed to provoke certain reactions. And once you see the game for what it is, you stop playing by someone else's rules, because at the end of the day, the most powerful defense against manipulation isn't confrontation. It's clarity. When you can recognize the tactics without reacting emotionally, when you stay grounded in your own sense of worth, you become untouchable. No one can control a man who fully understands his own value and sees through the illusions being presented to him. And that's where your real strength lies, not in fighting manipulation, but in being immune to it. You said expand key point 2 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact, and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said, the reason so many men fall into manipulative situations is because they lack one thing: unshakable boundaries. When you don't know where you stand, triple when you're not clear about what's acceptable and what's not, you automatically give someone else the power to decide it for you. And this is where it gets dangerous, because a manipulative woman will always test your limits. She wants to see how much she can get away with, how far she can push, how much you're willing to compromise just to keep her happy. And the truth is, the moment you start bending your standards to avoid conflict or to please her, you've already handed over control. Boundaries are not about building walls. They're not about shutting people out. They're about knowing your worth so deeply that you refuse to accept less than what you deserve. A lot of men mistake being nice for being accommodating, but there's a difference. Niceness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. When you keep saying yes to things that go against your values, your desires, or your emotional well-being, you're silently telling her that your needs don't matter. And once she believes that, manipulation becomes effortless. The thing is, setting boundaries is easy. Maintaining them is where most men fail. Because the moment you set a limit, someone will challenge it. She might get upset. She might guilt trip you. She might accuse you of not caring or not loving her enough. And this is where you have to understand something fundamental. A boundary isn't truly a boundary unless you're willing to enforce it, even when it costs you. If you back down every time someone pressures you, you don't have boundaries, you have preferences. And preferences don't protect you from manipulation. You also need to realize that boundaries are not about controlling someone else's behavior. They're about controlling your own. You can't force anyone to respect you. and he can decide what you'll tolerate. If someone constantly crosses your lines, you don't argue, you don't beg, and you don't explain yourself endlessly. You take action. That might mean walking away, creating distance, or simply refusing to engage in situations that drain you. Your boundaries are a reflection of your self-respect. The stronger your respect for yourself, the less permission anyone has to control you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some women will leave when you set firm boundaries. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. The right person won't be threatened by your standards. She'll respect them. The wrong person, the one who relies on manipulation and control, will feel frustrated because she no longer has easy access to your emotions. That's the price of self-respect. You lose people who were never meant to have that kind of power over you in the first place. When you know your limits and you stand by them, you send a silent but powerful message. You cannot be controlled, you cannot be guilted, and you cannot be manipulated. And that's when everything begins to shift. You said, expand key point 1 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact, and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said manipulation is never allowed. It doesn't come crashing into your life, waving red flags and making obvious demands. It's quiet, calculated, and often disguised as care, affection, or concern. Triple. That's why so many men don't see it coming until they're already caught in it. At first, everything feels natural. She connects with you emotionally. She listens. She seems to understand you in ways no one else does. And because it feels genuine, you lower your guard. That's exactly when manipulation begins to weave its way into your life, not through force, but through subtle influence. The reason manipulation works so effectively is that it doesn't attack your logic, it targets your emotions. If someone came to you with blunt control, you'd resist it immediately. But when they make you feel something, guilt, fear, shame, or even an exaggerated sense of responsibility, you don't question it. Instead, you start reacting emotionally, not rationally. A manipulative woman knows this instinctively. She understands that if she can make you feel responsible for her happiness, she doesn't have to ask you to act a certain way. You'll do it on your own. That's the power of psychological influence. The tools she uses are rarely obvious. Guilt is one of the most powerful. Suddenly, no matter what you do, it's never enough. You start feeling like you're constantly falling short, like you need to try harder, give more, sacrifice more, not because you actually believe it's fair, but because you don't want to disappoint her. Another common tactic is playing the victim. She'll paint herself as the one being hurt, misunderstood, or mistreated, even when you've done nothing wrong. And before you know it, you're apologizing for things you didn't even do, just to restore peace and prove your loyalty. Her manipulation also thrives on dependency. She'll give you just enough affection, validation, or approval to get you emotionally invested. And then slowly, she'll start withdrawing it whenever she wants to steer your behavior. You'll find yourself chasing the connection you once had, doing things you normally wouldn't, just to earn back what she made you feel in the beginning. And that's the trap. You're not choosing freely anymore. You're reacting to carefully created emotional triggers. But here's the reality. Most men overlook manipulation only works when you don't see it. It feeds on your lack of awareness. Triple. The moment you start understanding the psychology behind it, when you can identify guilt, tripping, emotional blackmail, and victim playing for what they are, the power dynamic shifts. You stop reacting blindly and you start observing patterns. You begin noticing inconsistencies between words and actions. You recognize when your emotions are being used as a tool against you. And once you reach that level of clarity, everything changes. You stop being an easy target. Because when you can see the game, you're no longer a pawn in it. You said expand key point 3 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact, and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said, if you really want to stop being manipulated, you need to understand one thing very clearly. People can only control you through your emotions. That's where it all begins. Manipulation doesn't work on a man who is emotionally grounded, but the moment someone knows what triggers you, they have a handle on you without you even realizing it. And this is where so many men lose control. Not because they're weak, but because they're unaware of the buttons being pushed. A manipulative woman studies you more closely than you think. She pays attention to what makes you react, what makes you angry, what makes you feel guilty, and what makes you desperate for her approval. Once she identifies those emotional weak spots, she doesn't need to force you into anything. She simply nudges you toward making decisions that benefit her. If she knows you hate conflict, she'll use silence to punish you until you give in. If she knows you fear losing her, She'll threaten withdrawal to keep you chasing her validation. And if she knows you crave appreciation, she'll offer just enough of it to keep you hooked. Then take it away the moment she wants you to comply. The problem is, most men don't even realize when this is happening because they're too caught up in how they feel. You start thinking your reactions are natural, but they're not, they're being shaped. That's why self-awareness is so important. You need to know your emotional triggers better than anyone else. If you're constantly seeking validation, you need to recognize that craving before someone uses it against you. If you fear abandonment, you have to understand how easily that fear can be manipulated. The more unconscious you are of your emotional patterns, and the easier it becomes for someone to control you without saying a single word. This is why emotional mastery is power. It's not about suppressing what you feel. It's about understanding it so deeply that no one can weaponize it against you. When you learn to pause before reacting, when you can observe your feelings without immediately acting on them, you take back control. Imagine how different it feels when someone tries to guilt trip you, and instead of reacting, you calmly see it for what it is. Imagine when someone plays the victim to pull you in, but you stay grounded and refuse to be drawn into a drama that isn't yours. That's what emotional strength looks like, clarity over chaos. At the core of manipulation is a simple truth that only works if you're predictable. If you always react the same way when your emotions are triggered, you become easy to control. But the moment you stop being reactive and start being intentional, you become untouchable. Because when you master your emotions, no one can play you. You said expand key point 4 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact, and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said, one of the biggest mistakes men make when dealing with manipulation is believing words over actions. You want to trust what she says because it feels good, it reassures you, and it gives you hope. But manipulation thrives in that gap between what's said and what's done. A manipulative woman can say all the right things. She'll promise loyalty, care, and commitment, yet her behavior will tell an entirely different story. And as long as you keep focusing on her words while ignoring her actions, you'll always stay trapped in confusion. You have to understand that manipulation isn't about lying directly, it's about creating emotional illusions. Sweet talk reassurances and carefully chosen words are tools to keep you emotionally invested while her actions quietly serve her own interests. She might tell you she respects your boundaries but repeatedly crosses them. She might say she values honesty but withholds information when it suits her. She might claim she cares about your happiness, yet everything somehow revolves around hers. This inconsistency isn't random, it's intentional. Because as long as you're distracted by what she says, you'll question your own judgment instead of hers. The key here is to train yourself to observe patterns, not promises. Anyone can act loving for a day, a week, or even a month when they want something from you. But over time, patterns always reveal intent if her words and her actions don't align. Believe the actions every single time. They tell you the truth she doesn't want to say out loud. And this is where many men struggle, because believing actions often means facing uncomfortable realities that she might not actually care the way she claims to, that her affection might be conditional, or that the connection you thought was genuine might be one-sided. When you start focusing on behavior, you regain clarity. Triple, you stop being swayed by emotional highs and lows because you're grounded in what's real, not what's promised. You start seeing through tactics like gaslighting. When she tries to make you doubt your own perception of events, you stop falling for the push and pull game where she gives you affection to hook you and then withdraws it to keep you chasing. You stop letting temporary words distract you from consistent patterns. This shift in perspective is powerful because it takes away the manipulator's greatest weapon, your emotional blindness. Once you see things for what they are instead of what you're told they are, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer reacting based on how her words make you feel and responding based on what her actions show you. And that's when manipulation loses its grip completely, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what someone says they feel. What matters is what they consistently do. Actions will always expose intentions, and once you learn to trust them over words, you'll never be played again. You said expand key point 5 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact, and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said, the easiest way to be manipulated is to constantly seek approval. The moment you make someone else the source of your worth, you give them complete control over you. This is where so many men unknowingly set themselves up for manipulation, by putting a woman on a pedestal and allowing her opinion to define their value. When you crave her validation, Every word she says carries weight. Every gesture affects your mood, and every disagreement feels like a personal rejection. And once someone knows you need their approval, they don't even have to push hard to influence you. All they have to do is give or withhold affection strategically, and you'll bend to keep it. A manipulative woman understands this dynamic better than you think. If she knows you're desperate to be seen as good enough, she'll make that approval conditional. She'll give you attention when she wants something from you, and she'll pull back the moment you try to assert yourself. You'll find yourself overcompensating, doing things you wouldn't normally do, tolerating behavior you wouldn't normally accept, just to win back a validation. It's not always deliberate cruelty. Sometimes it's simply about control. And the truth is, you give her that control every time you make her opinion the center of your identity. The problem runs deeper than just relationships. Many men tie their entire sense of self-worth to how they're perceived by others, especially by women. If you grew up believing that being loved, accepted, or admired defines your value, you'll unconsciously hand over power to anyone who promises those things. This makes you vulnerable, not because you're weak, but because you haven't built an internal source of confidence when you rely on someone else to feel significant. You create the perfect environment for manipulation to thrive. The solution isn't to become cold or detached. It's to build a life and identity and a sense of purpose that aren't dependent on anyone else's approval. When you know who you are, when you set your own standards, and when you validate yourself first, manipulation stops working. A woman can no longer control you by threatening to leave because you're no longer terrified of being alone. She can't use guilt to force your compliance because you're no longer living to please her. You become grounded, steady, and unshakable. And ironically, that's when you earn genuine respect. Approval seeking gives away your power, but self-validation takes it back. When you stop chasing validation and start living by your own values, you shift the entire dynamic. You're no longer reacting to external pressure. You're choosing based on what aligns with your principles. And once you reach that point, no one can manipulate you because your worth no longer comes from their acceptance. It comes from within. You said expand point 6 into a 500-word segment, flowing naturally within the speech and maintaining alignment with the overall key points. Avoid any headings and ensure the tone is seamless and conversational. Conclude with only the necessary closing line for impact and don't mention Sadia Khan. Name and write it like Sadia Khan is giving speech. ChatGPT said, the strongest position you can ever hold in any relationship is the ability to walk away. It's not about being cold or heartless. It's about valuing yourself enough to refuse to stay where your boundaries are ignored, where your worth isn't respected, or where manipulation becomes the norm. But here's the truth. Most men struggle with this. They stay in situations that drain them emotionally, hoping things will change, hoping she'll finally see their efforts pull, hoping the relationship will go back to how it was in the beginning. And this hope is exactly what keeps them stuck, because manipulation feeds on your fear of losing someone. When you can't walk away, you give away control. Every time you tolerate disrespect, every time you stay silent when your boundaries are crossed, but every time you accept less than what you deserve just to keep someone around, you're training them to keep treating you the same way. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly your self-respect erodes. And once you've shown someone that you'll stay no matter what, they stop valuing you the way they once did. That's the uncomfortable reality most men don't want to face. Walking away isn't about punishing someone. It's about protecting yourself. It's about saying, I choose peace over chaos. I choose dignity over disrespect. I choose myself over manipulation. And yes, it's hard. It's hard because your emotions are invested. It's hard because you fear being alone. It's hard because part of you believes leaving means losing. But here's what you need to understand. Staying in a situation where you're constantly being controlled or undervalued isn't love. It's attachment. An attachment without respect is a trap. The moment you realize that your happiness, your identity, and your worth are not tied to any one person, everything changes. Suddenly, manipulation loses its power because there's nothing to hold over you. Threatening to leave doesn't work on a man who knows he can rebuild without you. Emotional games don't work on someone who refuses to participate in them. You become unshakable, not because you're indifferent, but because you understand your value deeply enough to never settle for less than you deserve. And here's the paradox when you truly embody this strength. When you're willing to walk away if necessary, people begin to treat you differently. Respect grows. Boundaries are honored. The dynamic shifts entirely because you're no longer operating from fear. You're operating from self-respect. The ability to walk away isn't weakness. It's your greatest form of power, because the man who can leave when his values are compromised is the man who can never be manipulated.